Get out of my house. That was the first thing I heard after 18 months overseas. Standing in my own kitchen with a duffel bag still hanging from my shoulder, staring at a stranger stirring chili in my mother's old cast-iron pot. Her husband was sitting on my couch. 2 kids were eating cereal from my bowls. And somehow every face in that room looked at me like I was the one who had broken in. My name is Caleb Mercer. And until that morning, I thought coming home from deployment would be the easy part. I'd spent a year and a half stationed in Kuwait and northern Iraq, sleeping through sandstorms, listening for alarms in the dark, and counting the days until I could walk back into the little brick house I'd bought in Cedar Ridge, North Carolina. It was not a mansion, not even close, just a 3-bedroom place with a crooked maple tree out front and a detached garage where I rebuilt old pickup trucks on weekends. But it was mine, and that word mattered to me more than most people understood. I grew up moving between relatives after my father died and my mother disappeared into addiction, so ownership had always felt like something other families got to have. That house was the first place where I had ever unpacked every box. The woman at my stove turned slowly, still holding the wooden spoon. She was maybe 35, tired eyes, hospital scrubs, hair tied up with a rubber band. She looked scared, but not guilty. "Excuse me," she said. "This is our home." I laughed once because the other option was shouting. "No, ma'am, this is my home. That is my couch. Those are my dishes. And you are cooking in a pot that belonged to my mother." Her husband stood up immediately, palms open. He was a broad-shouldered guy with paint under his fingernails, the kind of man who looked like he worked for every dollar. Nobody wanted to fight, least of all him. "Hold on," he said. "We rent this place. We have a lease." His wife hurried to a drawer, my drawer, and pulled out a folder with receipts, signatures, and an official-looking rental agreement. The landlord was listed as Loretta Vance, president of the Cedar Ridge Property Association. Before I could even process that name, a white Cadillac SUV pulled into my driveway like it owned the asphalt. Loretta stepped out wearing cream-colored heels, oversized sunglasses, and the exact smile people wear when they have already decided the rules only apply to everyone else. She had been president of our neighborhood association for 7 years, mostly because no sane person wanted to argue about mailbox colors at monthly meetings. She was 54, recently divorced, formerly a real estate broker, and permanently convinced that suburban life was a kingdom with her name on the deed. "Caleb," she said as she walked through my front door without knocking. "You are back sooner than expected." I looked at her, then at the family, then back at her. "Why are strangers living in my house?" Loretta removed her sunglasses slowly. The property was classified as unattended and subject to temporary community management. I stared at her. "I was deployed. You failed to maintain occupancy requirements. I notified the board in person. You were sitting 3 feet away from me." She tilted her head with fake sympathy. "I do not recall receiving formal documentation. There are procedures, Caleb. Service does not exempt homeowners from responsibility." Something inside me went very quiet. That is a strange thing combat teaches you. Sometimes anger does not arrive like fire. Sometimes it arrives like ice, clean and sharp and useful. I looked at Loretta and smiled for the first time that morning. "All right," I said. "Then let us follow procedures." She mistook that smile for surrender. That was her first mistake. The family renting my house were the Parkers, Elena, her husband Marcus, and their children Lily and Sam. Elena worked nights as a respiratory therapist. Marcus painted commercial buildings, and they had paid Loretta $3,000 as a security deposit, $2,600 for the first month, plus what she called an administrative transfer fee. Loretta had told them the owner had abandoned the property after defaulting on his mortgage. She had shown them documents with county seals, association letterhead, and a signature that looked close enough to mine if you had never actually seen it. When Marcus realized who I was, the color drained from his face. "Man, I am sorry," he said. "We had no idea." I believed him. People think the hardest moment was seeing strangers in my house, but it was not. The hardest moment was watching those kids stop eating because they thought I was about to throw them into the street. They had framed drawings taped to my refrigerator, backpacks by the door, and shoes lined up on the mat I had bought before deployment. Loretta had not only stolen from me, she had built her crime on another family's trust. I told the Parkers they could stay for 48 hours while I figured out what happened. Loretta hated that. "You do not have authority to interfere with an active association lease." she said. I turned toward her. You rented my house without permission, and now you are explaining authority to me in my kitchen. Her mouth tightened. There is no need to be hostile. Hostile was the word she chose for a soldier, asking why his home had been taken while he served overseas. I wanted to laugh, but instead I asked one question. Where are my belongings? She said they had been placed in secure storage for community protection. That phrase told me everything. My father's tools, my service medals, the photographs of my mother before addiction hollowed her out, the old baseball glove my grandfather gave me. All of it had been packed up by strangers under Loretta's orders. She handed me the address of a storage facility on the edge of town and told me the association had covered the first 90 days as a courtesy. A courtesy. I had learned to rebuild transmissions with my grandfather in that garage, and Loretta spoke about my life like it was abandoned furniture. I left before rage made decisions for me. At the storage unit, I found half my belongings stacked carelessly behind a rusted metal door. Boxes marked fragile were crushed. My military uniforms had been shoved into garbage bags. One of my mother's framed photographs had a crack through her face. My tool chest was missing, along with 2 restored carburetors, a vintage watch, and the envelope where I kept emergency cash. I sat on the concrete floor for a long time, surrounded by everything I had worked to protect. And for the first time since coming home, I felt completely unsteady. Overseas, danger had rules. You watched the road, checked your equipment, trusted the people beside you. Here, the threat wore perfume, carried association bylaws, and smiled while stealing your home. That evening, I went to see Walter Briggs, a retired postal inspector who lived across the street from me. Walter was 73, walked with a cane, and noticed everything. He poured coffee, listened without interrupting, then opened a kitchen drawer and pulled out a thick folder. I kept copies, he said. Copies of what? Every notice she posted on your door. Every vehicle that came to your house. Every day the moving crew was there. Your friend Denise asked me to keep an eye on things after she had surgery. Denise was the neighbor I had originally trusted to collect my mail. But Loretta had told me she moved to care for her sister. Walter shook his head. She did not move. She was hospitalized for 6 weeks, and Loretta used the timing. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed Loretta standing in my driveway 3 months after I deployed, talking to a locksmith and pointing at my front door. Behind the photo was a date, time, and license plate number written in Walter's careful handwriting. Then he handed me something even better, a printed copy of the neighborhood meeting minutes from the night I announced my deployment. My name was there, along with the exact dates of my absence and Loretta's handwritten note promising that the association would monitor the property. I looked at Walter. Where did you get this? I was secretary before she pushed me off the board, he said. Loretta can rewrite the official record, but she cannot rewrite my files. I drove home after dark with that folder on the passenger seat and a calm I had not felt all day. Loretta believed she had taken advantage of an absent soldier with no family, no witnesses, and no energy for a legal fight. What she did not know was that I had spent 18 months learning patience, documentation, and exactly how dangerous a person can become when they stop reacting and start planning. The next morning, I walked into the county records office with Walter's folder under my arm and enough coffee in my system to qualify as a controlled substance. The clerk behind the counter was a woman named June Holloway, late 60s, silver hair, red glasses, and the kind of expression that said she had watched 3 generations of local crooks underestimate public records. I gave her my address and asked for every filing connected to the property, every lien, management notice, ownership transfer, rental authorization, anything bearing my name or the Cedar Ridge Property Association seal. June typed for a while, frowned at the screen, then looked over those red glasses. There is nothing here authorizing anyone to rent your house, she said. No abandonment filing, no court order, no transfer of control. Your deed is clean, mortgage current, taxes paid. She printed the records, stamped them, and slid the stack toward me. Then she lowered her voice. You are not the first person to ask about Ms. Vance. That got my attention. June told me an elderly widower from the west side of the neighborhood had recently disputed an emergency repair assessment, and a young couple had complained that the association charged them $5,000 for drainage work that the county never approved. None of it proved what Loretta had done to me, but it told me I was not looking at one bad decision. I was looking at a pattern. From there, I went to the Association Management Company, a beige office park building that smelled like toner, stale carpet, and quiet resentment. Loretta had always acted like she personally controlled every record in Cedar Ridge, but our dues were processed by a third-party company called Palmetto Community Services. The regional manager, Aaron Cole, met me in a conference room after I showed my deployment orders and the lease bearing Loretta's signature. She read it twice, then sat back very slowly. "We did not issue this," she said. "Our company never approved a rental program. The letterhead is ours, but the document number is fake." I asked for the original board minutes from the meeting before I deployed. Aaron hesitated, explained that she could not release internal files without legal review, then took one more look at my uniform photograph attached to the orders. "Give me an hour," she said. That hour changed everything. Aaron returned with printed emails, archived minutes, and a copy of a message Loretta had sent to the association's attorney 4 months before placing the Parkers in my home. In that message, Loretta asked whether the board could temporarily take control of houses left unoccupied during extended military deployment. The attorney's reply could not have been clearer. No, the association had no legal authority to enter, manage, lease, or collect income from privately owned property, regardless of how long the owner was absent. Any attempt to do so could expose individual board members to civil and criminal liability. Loretta had read that warning, replied understood, and then did it anyway. That word sat on the page like a fingerprint. Understood. She had not misunderstood the bylaws. She had not made a clerical mistake. She had asked whether stealing my house was legal, been told no, and decided the answer was inconvenient. Aaron also found something else. The official minutes from the night I announced my deployment had been altered 3 weeks later. My statement had been removed. The attendance list had been changed, and Walter's name as secretary had been replaced with Loretta's. The digital system kept revision histories, and every edit traced back to Loretta's login. I called the Veterans Legal Clinic before I even left the parking lot. By that afternoon, I was sitting across from attorney Naomi Pierce, a former Army JAG officer with a sharp voice, a calm face, and a habit of tapping her pen whenever someone had done something exceptionally stupid. By the time I finished, her pen sounded like a woodpecker. She organized the evidence across her desk: lease, payment receipts, storage invoices, altered minutes, attorney correspondence, photographs, county records. "Caleb," she said, "this is not an HOA dispute. This is fraud, forgery, conversion of property, unlawful entry, theft of rental income, and potentially a violation of federal protections for deployed service members." Then she looked at the Parkers' lease again. "And if these county seals are fabricated, she may have impersonated a public office." I asked what we did next. Naomi smiled without humor. "We let her keep talking." That turned out to be easy because Loretta loved nothing more than the sound of her own authority. The next day, she sent a neighborhood-wide email titled "Security Concern Regarding Returning Resident." In it, she described me as emotionally unstable, aggressive, and possibly suffering from untreated combat trauma. She warned neighbors not to engage with me alone and claimed I was harassing lawful tenants. It was a clever move in its own ugly way. Loretta knew she could not explain the forged lease, so she tried to make the person asking questions look dangerous. For about 6 hours, it worked. People avoided eye contact. Curtains moved when I walked past. One neighbor pulled his daughter inside when he saw me checking my mailbox. That hurt more than I expected. I'd come home imagining handshakes, maybe a casserole, maybe somebody asking whether I was all right. Instead, I was being treated like an unexploded device because Loretta had attached the letters PTSD to my name. Then Walter answered her email. He did not rant, threaten, or insult anyone. He attached the original meeting minutes, the dated photograph of the locksmith, and a short statement confirming that I had properly notified the board. Elena Parker sent a message next, explaining that Loretta had lied to her family about foreclosure and ownership. Aaron from the management company confirmed that the lease was unauthorized. By sunset, Loretta's little warning email had become a public evidence thread. Neighbors who had ignored years of smaller abuses suddenly started replying with their own stories. Fake fines, missing payments, unexplained assessments, contractors connected to Loretta's brother, checks made out to entities nobody recognized. The thing about fear is that it looks permanent, right until one person speaks first. After that, it can collapse fast. Loretta showed up at my motel room 2 nights later because I was still letting the Parkers stay in the house while Naomi sorted out the legal occupancy mess. Loretta wore a navy dress, pearls, and a smile that had been rehearsed in the mirror. She carried a cashier's check for $7,500. I opened the door but left the security chain fastened. "There has been some confusion," she said. "The board wants to resolve this amicably." "The board does not know you are here," I said. Her smile twitched. "You have been through a stressful experience, Caleb. People may understand if your memory of the notification process is incomplete." I looked at the check in her hand. "How much did you charge the Parkers?" "That is not relevant." "How much, Loretta?" Her eyes hardened. "This offer expires tonight. $7,500 in exchange for a release. Confidentiality and immediate recognition of the lease through the end of the year." I almost admired the nerve of it. She was offering me part of the money she stole so I would sign permission for her to keep stealing it. I told her to say the terms again, slowly. She did, irritation making her careless. What she did not know was that Naomi had advised me to record every encounter, and North Carolina law allowed me to record a conversation I was part of. My phone sat face down on the table behind me, capturing every word. When she finished, I asked why she had altered the minutes. For the first time, real fear crossed her face. "I did no such thing. The management company has the revision log." Loretta stared at me through the narrow opening in the door. "You have no idea how this neighborhood works. I have relationships with the county, the police, the board, people who matter." I nodded. That is usually what people say right before discovering those relationships are not as loyal as they thought. Her expression changed then, the polished mask slipping just enough to reveal the anger underneath. "You were gone," she snapped. The house was sitting empty. The lawn was deteriorating, and the community needed stable occupancy. I found a responsible family and protected property values. You made $2,600 a month from a home you did not own. I provided a service. To yourself. Her voice dropped. "Take the money, Caleb. You do not want a public fight. Veterans with anger issues do not always look sympathetic in court." There it was, the threat dressed as advice. I leaned closer to the gap in the door. "You should probably stop talking now." She stepped back, clutching the check against her purse, and gave me one last look filled with the confidence of someone who had bullied people for so long she had forgotten resistance was possible. "You will regret humiliating me," she said. I closed the door, sent the recording to Naomi, and slept better than I had since returning home. Loretta kept her promise. 3 days later, the Parkers received citations for noise, unauthorized children's equipment, commercial vehicle parking, and improper window coverings. Marcus's work van was towed at dawn even though it was legally parked in my driveway. Elena was written up for leaving for work before approved quiet hours, which was impressive considering driving to a hospital had apparently become an architectural violation. Loretta was trying to force them out before investigators could interview them. I paid to recover the van, then installed cameras around the property. Front door, driveway, backyard, garage, every angle covered. My old friend Devin Shaw drove in from Fort Bragg to help. Devin had been my squad leader and had the rare ability to make surveillance equipment sound like a hobby for relaxed people. He mounted a camera above the garage and said, "You know, most folks buy these to watch raccoons. We get HOA presidents. Better posture, worse judgment." For the first time in days, I laughed. That night, Naomi filed for an emergency injunction, and the county sheriff's fraud unit opened a formal investigation. Loretta must have learned about it because her behavior changed almost immediately. She stopped walking past my house. Her Cadillac stayed behind closed garage doors. The neighborhood emails became frantic, full of warnings about military intimidation, outsiders, and a coordinated attempt to overthrow elected leadership. Then, just after 2 in the morning on Friday, my phone vibrated with a motion alert. I opened the camera feed and saw Loretta crossing my backyard in black leggings, a hooded sweatshirt, and white running shoes that glowed under infrared like 2 tiny confessions. She moved toward the garage carrying a plastic bag in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. Devin, asleep on the motel room couch, woke when I said her name. We watched in silence as Loretta forced the side door, entered my garage, and crouched behind the workbench where my missing tool chest used to sit. She pulled a small packet from the bag, tucked it beneath a cabinet, and photographed it with her phone. Devin looked at me. "Please tell me she is not doing what I think she is doing." I was already dialing 911. Loretta had spent years convincing herself that everyone around her was weak, distracted, or afraid. At 2:14 that morning, she was about to learn the difference between an empty house and a house whose owner was finally watching. The dispatcher kept me on the line while 2 patrol cars headed toward Cedar Ridge, and Devin and I watched Loretta through the camera feed as she slipped back out of my garage, pulled the door shut, and crossed the yard with the careful little steps of someone who believed she had just outsmarted the world. She made it halfway to the sidewalk before headlights swept across the front of the house. Deputy Mallory stepped from the first cruiser, one hand near his belt, while his partner moved toward the backyard. Loretta froze beside the maple tree, then recovered so quickly I almost respected it. "Officers, thank goodness," she called, pointing toward my garage. I was conducting a community safety inspection and found something suspicious inside. Mallory looked at the screwdriver in her hand, then at the mud on her white shoes. At 2 in the morning, Loretta lifted her chin. "This property remains under association supervision." That was when I arrived with Devin and opened the live recording on my phone. I did not argue, threaten, or raise my voice. I simply handed Mallory the screen and let Loretta watch herself force the garage door, crawl behind the cabinet, plant the packet, and take photographs. The silence that followed felt almost physical. Mallory asked her to turn around. Loretta laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You cannot be serious. That man is manipulating you. He is unstable." Deputy Mallory held out the handcuffs. "Ma'am, the camera is not suffering from combat trauma." The packet contained prescription pills and a small amount of cocaine, enough to create a headline, threaten my military benefits, and give Loretta another excuse to call me dangerous. Instead, it gave the sheriff's department probable cause for a deeper search. By sunrise, Loretta was sitting in county lockup, still insisting the association had authorized everything, while investigators carried boxes from her home and office. The raid uncovered forged seals, copied signatures, stacks of blank violation forms, and a spreadsheet titled Property Opportunities. My address was near the top. Beside it, Loretta had written 18-month deployment, no immediate family, good rental demand, low resistance risk. I read those words in Naomi's office later that day, and something in me finally broke open. Until then, I had treated the whole thing like a mission. Gather evidence, protect civilians, control emotion, move forward. But seeing my life reduced to low resistance risk made the theft personal, in a way the missing tools and damaged photographs had not. Loretta had looked at everything I had survived: foster homes, loss, deployment, loneliness, and seen not a neighbor but an opportunity. Naomi let me sit with that for a moment before sliding another document across the table. It was a list of 12 other residents marked with similar notes: widowed, confused, traveling often, deployed spouse, limited English, financially distressed. Loretta had spent years studying weakness the way honest people study opportunity. She charged elderly homeowners for repairs that never happened, routed landscaping contracts through her brother's company, collected special assessments for projects that existed only in newsletters, and threatened anyone who asked questions with liens and foreclosure notices. My house had not created a criminal operation. It had simply exposed it. Once the news of her arrest spread, the neighborhood changed almost overnight. People who had whispered behind curtains began knocking on my motel door with folders under their arms. Mrs. Gaines brought receipts for a roof assessment she had paid twice. A young couple named Andre and Melissa showed bank records proving Loretta had charged them for drainage work the county never approved. Walter arrived carrying 3 binders and a lemon pie, because, in his words, no federal investigation should proceed on an empty stomach. The Parkers gave statements about the fake lease, the cash deposits, and every threat Loretta made after I returned. Marcus apologized again for living in my house, and I told him to stop. He had been robbed too. By the end of the week, the district attorney had combined the complaints into a broader fraud case, and a federal investigator from the Department of Justice joined because Loretta had specifically targeted deployed service members. Her attorney tried to negotiate quickly. The first offer included full repayment, resignation from the association, and a public apology in exchange for my silence. The second offer doubled the money and added compensation for my damaged property. Naomi read both proposals, looked at me, and asked what I wanted. For a few seconds, I thought about taking the money. I was tired. I wanted my garage back, My tools replaced, my life quiet again. Revenge sounds satisfying when you are angry, but legal fights consume mornings, weekends, sleep, and pieces of your personality you do not always get back. Then Elena called and told me Loretta's attorney had contacted the Parkers separately, offering to pay their moving expenses if they changed their statement, and claimed I had frightened them into cooperating. That ended my hesitation. I told Naomi we were not settling. Loretta had spent years betting that decent people would choose peace over accountability. I decided peace without truth was just another word for surrender. 6 months later, the Cedar Ridge Community Center was packed for the sentencing and restitution hearing. Loretta entered through a side door wearing county gray instead of designer cream, wrists cuffed, hair unstyled, the old confidence reduced to something thin and brittle. A prosecutor presented the forged lease, the altered meeting minutes, the recording from my motel room, and the garage footage. Then the other resident spoke. Mrs. Pre. Gaines described skipping medication to pay a fake emergency assessment. Andre explained how Loretta threatened foreclosure when he questioned an invoice. Elena told the judge how her children had believed they were about to become homeless because 2 adults had been tricked into fighting over the same house. When my turn came, I looked at Loretta and expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired, sad, and strangely calm. I told the judge that deployment had taught me to prepare for danger from far away, but I had never imagined the person waiting to hurt me would be the woman entrusted to watch my neighborhood. Loretta did not steal an empty building, I said. She stole the one place I believed would still be mine when I came home. The judge sentenced her to 11 years in federal prison, ordered full restitution, seized her Cadillac and house to repay victims, and permanently barred her from serving on any property association board. When the cuffs clicked around her wrists again, nobody applauded. That surprised me. After everything, the room did not feel like a celebration. It felt like a community finally exhaling. The Parkers stayed at my house for another month while they found a place nearby. And when they moved, Marcus helped me rebuild the garage. Walter found my missing tool chest at a pawn shop using serial numbers from an old insurance inventory. Elena repaired my mother's cracked photograph and returned it in a new wooden frame. I eventually moved back into the house, but it did not feel the same at first. I changed the locks, painted the kitchen, and restored the garage, yet the real repair happened more slowly. It came through neighbors bringing dinner, children waving from bicycles, and people attending association meetings because they finally understood that ignoring small abuses is how large ones grow. Walter became board president for exactly 1 year, then stepped down because he believed anyone who enjoys authority too much should never keep it long. I became the association's deployment liaison, making sure no military family ever returned to the kind of welcome I received. As for Loretta, some people still say 11 years was excessive because she never physically hurt anyone. Others say she deserved more because she targeted people who trusted her and chose victims she believed could not fight back. I still think about that whenever I sit in my garage, listening to a socket wrench click against steel while the evening light falls across the driveway. Maybe justice is not about enjoying someone's destruction. Maybe it is about making sure they cannot keep destroying everyone else. But tell me honestly, if you came home from serving your country and found an HOA president renting out your house, would you have taken the settlement and moved on? Or would you have pushed until every secret came out? Share your answer in the comments. And if this story made you question how much power neighbors should ever hand to an HOA, send it to someone who needs the warning and subscribe for more stories where ordinary people finally decide they have had enough.